We've got 4 topics that we decided to try and take on here, and we've got about 15 minutes for each one. Topic number 1 is remote and hybrid work, and how that impacts each university. And Mike here is going to lead. Oh, excuse me. Hang on. Let introductions happen here first. Sorry. Let's go here.
I'm Mike Chihoski. I'm the Senior Associate Vice President at the University of Rochester in New York.
I'm Terie McClintock. I'm the Director of Business Analytics within Facilities, and I oversee our systems, our IT efforts.
Good morning, Pete Strazdas, Associate Vice President of Facility Management at Western Michigan University. As of 3 months ago, I just retired after 43 years in this great profession.
All right. Okay, so Mike, tell us a little bit about what's happening at your university in regards to hybrid. I know you have kind of a unique dynamic there, but everybody's facing that same kind of issue, and what are you doing to work through those?
Okay, so, well, the first thing is acknowledging that hybrid is here to stay. Whether we like it or not, remote work, there are certain functions that are never coming back to campus, that went away and will remain hybrid or remote. But I think then the other piece is not overreacting to the information or the decisions we're making, because we don't have enough information, in my opinion. So an example is our board came to us right away and said, look, now that we have remote working, first thing we want to do is cut 50% of our lease spaces. And I said, let's not jump to that conclusion yet. You know, there's certain things we don't know and we need to figure out over time. So I think there's certain core functions we know are always going to be on campus, right? Our essential workers around facilities, dining, EVS, those things have to be there. Certain research functions, we're not going to build wet labs in people's homes. They're going to be on campus, they're going to be doing their work there. There's certain things that are core to the university that'll always be there. But there are other functions like finance, administrative support, IT, that may make sense being remote and working off-site. So how do we handle that? You know, we're in a fortunate situation where we are in Western New York, that traffic isn't a huge problem. So I think, you know, I don't envy people in California and other metropolitan areas where you have an hour-plus commute to work. That even puts more pressure on the demand for remote options than we have. But we are still looking at it and trying to figure out the best thing. And the other thing I've tried to instill with our staff is, and our leadership is, you know, don't take the single data point that it worked during COVID. COVID was a unique, experience. We had a global pandemic. People were willing to do exceptional things. The other thing is we took a workforce that had typically worked for us 10 plus years. They knew our culture, they knew our mission, they knew our vision, and they were able to go home and they were able to be productive at work. It's a whole nother thing to think that we can onboard new staff and instill to them the culture of the university without ever setting foot on campus. That's going to be a greater challenge long term, and I think we need to figure that out before we jump too far into the next area.
Yeah, that's a great point. So Terie, I know you've done a number of things at your university on how to manage this. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you're doing that?
Sure. Yeah, so we recently, over the last 3 years, and actually during COVID, we implemented Terie, which is a CMMS system that goes across the gamut. And the last year, we've been working on extending the space management aspects of that, so that we're creating like a self-service environment where not only can you certify a space at a certain time for indirect cost report and so on, but you also can all of the end users, the schools, the administrative areas can keep up with their occupants and their functionalization. So, you know, academic research, so on. So that we have a strong culture of working at home. We were able to be productive, but we really have an emphasis on getting back to campus. So there's a few areas that are staying hybrid, but the hoteling space is a big thing. So we're looking at how to reserve and implement technology that allows us to reserve hoteling space at the same time that we're doing all the other efforts to fully qualify space, or functionalize space.
So Pete, what's happening at your university? How are you supporting hybrid?
Yeah, hybrid, we've looked at this 3 dimensions, and that is our students, where are they at with hybrid education? were all put on steroids in a short period of time. We figured it out. I think we all did. And so the jury's still out. What is the future of hybrid in the academic side? And then, of course, faculty and staff. That's a tough one. And so we were at 3 days flexing, 2 days, and now we're at 1 day flexing, okay? And for our institution, it was important to have some equity and a policy in place. And then, of course, the community. How much is the community in your institutions, your campuses, are they doing anything hybrid? And more important than that, ladies and gentlemen, is where's the hockey puck going? Where is higher education 5, 10, 20 years from now? And so when you take a look at those 3 dimensions of students, faculty, staff, and the community, and then you lay on top of that, where are we going as an institution, higher education? Wait and see. But I think we do need to react. We are reacting. You're all reacting to doing something. And it should be reacted based upon data. So we're engaged right now in a more in-depth process with more data collection, which we'll, I guess, be talking about space management a little bit later. But it's critical to make those decisions based upon data, and we don't have a lot of historical data. And hoteling, my gosh, we talked about hoteling, and so we looked at that and we said, wait a minute, so if Johnny is going to be out Monday, Susie's out Tuesday, so now we have the discussion of what space are they going to share? And that gets complex, doesn't it? So don't have all the answers, but those are the things we're all facing. We're going to have to work together to sort it out.
Right. You have to have some way to engage your student and faculty staff. You know, you have to make it easy for them to see what are the opportunities for space, where am I going to sit, who else is sitting there, do I need a meeting room, and did it get cleaned from the last group that was in there.
Could I, on the shared space, that's one of the challenges, because I've talked to another number of institutions doing that in hoteling, and shared space is great, but this isn't going to come as a surprise to everybody. Everybody wants to be remote Monday and Friday.
Yeah.
So we don't save any space, right? If we have the maximum number of people there on a certain day, we need that maximum amount of space. So there's no savings if we don't have a workforce that we could have actually share space because they're here on different days. If they're all here on the same days, that doesn't do anything to help us with that. And the last piece on that is the cost savings that I think we have a leadership team, a finance team, a board who thinks there's going to be a big cost savings. And to Peter's point, we don't have enough data yet. And I really caution against that, in particular in states like we're in New York, California, other states that are very labor friendly. I would not be surprised in the near future that we are having to pay some form of stipend to employees we tell they have to work from home. It's one thing when they choose to work from home. It's another when we hire them directly as remote from the beginning. I think there's going to be a future cost to us to do that. And then we're going to have to weigh that against the cost of having them on campus and providing space for them.
All right, well, let's move on to the next topic here, which is sustainability and lowering the carbon footprint. And we had a very robust conversation in a few meetings we had about this. I mean, there's a lot to talk about. We're only going to touch the tip of the iceberg here, but you know, how you're funding projects to get changes made. How do you track the information, you know, and got some good answers on that. So Pete, on a level of 1 to 5, what's the level of focus at your university?
A 6. I think all of you obviously are off the charts with sustainability. As the students are coming on your campus, they grew up in a culture of this space, and they're expecting it. They're going to higher education. The leaders of education, they're expecting that on your campus. So without a doubt, it's a full spectrum. Everything about carbon footprint to recycling to everything related to sustainability. But I think it's important to know that all of us have been doing energy conservation projects. We've done all those small things. And ladies and gentlemen, we are at the crossroads right now of doing some grand things. We've picked all the low-hanging fruit. You all picked the low-hanging fruit. And how are you really going to move the dial? How are you going to move the dial on your carbon footprint? And it's all about measuring, too. And so, of course, on our campus, we've gone ahead and we have a cogen plant. We're in our 2nd generation right now. We're almost 100% self-sufficient. And we started with coal, went to natural gas, and so we had a 70% reduction in our carbon footprint. And again, it's a matter of where you start your baseline, okay? I started mine 26 years ago with coal. So I encourage you, when you talk to students, look at your baseline, and hopefully it's favorable to show that movement of the dial. But as you move forward, whether it's electric vehicles, more solar, the whole gamut. It's about measuring, meters, sub-meters, sub-meters, okay? And those sub-meters, quite frankly, don't actually make the meters run slower. It's an expense. So I put over $1.5 million of meters, and my boss wanted to know how much did we save. Well, we didn't save a dime on the meters, but we're saving obviously on measuring, and we have green revolving funds. So one of our best kept secrets on our campus is the green revolving fund, and now we have several $1 million that keep revolving every year, self-sufficient. And the secret there, ladies and gentlemen, is don't let your boss, the president, steal your green revolving fund. They have other needs too. I have a lot of needs, so it's terribly important to measure, terribly important to move in that direction, but more importantly, ladies and gentlemen, it's important to do grand things. And you just, there you go. You got to move the dial, and you're not moving it a tick at a time, and the students are demanding it.
Yep. So, Mike, you had some late breaking news that you heard about yesterday. You want to share that?
Well, actually, it was Friday afternoon, but Friday evening when I received an email from the president of our university sharing an article with me, wanting to know some talking points for her. So for those of you who haven't seen it, we'll make sure we share it because many of your universities are also named in it like we were. It was a Reuters investigative report that came down hard on universities and our sustainability efforts as a whole. So they particularly attacked Harvard, Dartmouth, NYU, University of North Carolina. They focused on the fact that while we've done a great job out there publicly showing our commitment to sustainability and looking at things like LEED buildings and even the large universities taking their endowments out of carbon investments, we haven't invested in our central plants. And we have some of the dirtiest plants in the country. And we're much dirtier than if we buy from the public grids. We're using 50 and 60-year-old technology in our plants. They used a statistic in there that showed that 95% of the central plants in America today at universities are polluting more than the ExxonMobil refinery in Texas. So it's something that was really eye-opening to take a look at. Now, that being said, there's some pretty bad data in that report, as you could expect as well, and manipulative data. For an example, we're on the bad list. Peter's on the good list. In terms of polluters. And it's because they compare us against our grid. Well, in Western New York, we have the cleanest grid in the United States. We actually produce half of the pollutants that Western Michigan does, but we're on the bad list, they're on the good list, because they're compared against a grid that's still burning coal. So it really is the denominator that they're comparing you against. Our grid is 100% nuclear and hydro. So unless they're going to let me put a reactor on campus, we're probably not going to be competitive against the public grid. That's a reality. But I think it focuses on some of the key things we have to look at. And again, it's not overreacting. It's not a single article that's going to change us, but it's another data point that we have to take into account. So one of the things we've looked at and we've measured, and we've done some of the things Peter's talking about. And the first thing is 85% of our greenhouse gas emissions come from our central plant. We knew that. It's burning natural gas. The more we can move to electrification because we have a clean grid, the more we could reduce that. But explaining to our board, the move to electrification today, in today's dollars, is $1.2 billion. That's not going to happen right away, nor should it, because guess what? Our grid could, if every one of us moved over, our public utility grids couldn't handle that kind of load. So we have to really think about how do we do this in a smart way over time, and as Peter said, the progress. Show the progress we've made. So when we look at total emissions, we had an article in our school campus newspaper that said you haven't reduced emissions in the last decade, and we haven't. When you look at total emissions, but we've doubled our square footage. So when we look at intensity and our carbon per square foot, we've done a tremendous job reducing it. But when you look at total, no, we haven't. So I think, those are the things where we have to have the data and make sure we understand the data so that we could educate others when they're looking at it, because people are going to pick a single point and focus on it.
No doubt. Terie, what's happening?
Yes, a lot of to achieve sustainability goals, you have to be able to measure the data. So we've done a lot of work around streamlining and implementing standards around our assets, our space, And then we're implementing building automation systems, even in the legacy buildings eventually. We're not quite there yet, but there's a new standard for that technology within any new space. And our most recent focus has been on water, sub-metering, like Pete mentioned, so that we can measure consumption at a particular spot or building, or whether it's a intramural field or whatever, and using all that data to really find leaks and look at performance. So those are some of the recent things. We've done, in the years past, we've done a lot of work around electricity procurement, and I can connect y'all with someone who can go through those details, but being able to get the data out of the systems and measure that, and all those meters and sensors, consumption, production, and waste is so key to reaching those goals.
Yep, and energy is certainly probably the top of the list and the one most people focus on, but certainly water is important in Texas these days. So measuring that, and we have a lot of customers that are implementing IoT devices so that their sensors
Yes,
all
these are IoT. And, I don't know about other people, but the city of Houston and their water billing is unbelievably archaic technology. So you get, a PDF and, there's lump sum meter reading. So we're really drilling into that and working with the city to give us the data that supports that. So it's been pretty fun.
If I could add, John, on the topic of sustainability, we are good as facility folks doing our jobs. You're all doing a great job. How good are you at telling your story about what you've done and how good you've done it? And so I would challenge all of you on the sustainability front is to tell your story. You're all doing great stuff. And more so than that, as the students are pushing on us to do more grand things, we are not educating them of what those things are, the cost of those things, and what it's going to take to get there. What is their skin in the game on our campuses to help get us there? And so 2 challenges moving forward for everyone in this room. Tell your story, tell it better, you got a lot of good stuff, and educate. Hell, we're in higher education, right? Educate.
That's a good point.
Good point. All right. Anything else on that topic? Okay, so moving on. Clearly, there's big changes happening in the enrollment, and it's a real dichotomy between smaller schools and larger schools. And it's been a challenge for a lot of people. It's a discussion, and it's both ends of the spectrum. Terie, I know you've been focusing on this a little bit. How are you measuring that?
Well, we have a new president, and we are in growth mode. We have the highest student population we've ever had. Rice is private. It's very small. It's very, very small compared to all y'all. But at the end of the day, growth mode means we have to understand what space we have. We don't use a lot of lease space, very, very little lease space. So, and we have a management company that runs. They have all kinds of assets all over the U.S. in terms of space, but or the university proper, this space app that I mentioned, we're able to. We went through an effort to standardize. This building is known by this name or this acronym across all systems within the university. We are making the use of that very, very transparent, and then we have, through our application, the ability to certify those labs and actually record who's in them for the indirect cost reports. And whether it's a student, a grad student, or a faculty, or a visiting professor, and so on. So we're just implementing this, but we're looking for very high adoption. We have a new provost and a new VP of administration, so we're looking for a lot of things to change. So as I said before, the first key is really being able to measure what you have, how you're using it, who's in it, who is allocated to it, and then compare that to the grants, and the level is highly competitive between the PIs in terms of what my lab, I need this, and so on. So we have just built a new engineering science building, so we're really in growth mode. So
Right. Right. And Mike, I know you're in growth mode too. Are you engaging in any P3 public-private partnerships, or how are you managing the growth?
So, so we are in a fortunate position that we are a growing university. Our last two first-year classes have been our two largest in history. Our grad programs are up. Our medical school can't even keep up. We're one of the leading medical schools in the country in terms of applications. We only approve less than 2% of the applications that apply to our medical school. So real needs we have on campus, and obviously demand. Our College of Nursing has doubled in the last 10 years. So there's a lot of different demands and trying to figure it out. The challenge we have on campus then is figuring out space. So we need the tools that Terie talked about, and how do we understand utilization of space. So, unfortunately in higher education, a lot of us, when you're in large universities or medium-sized universities, you have independent colleges that are in complete silos. And they don't talk to each other, they don't work together. So, one of our challenges is we have a president who's really focused on one university. That we are one university, one bottom line. We have a CFO who continues to remind us there's only one checking account at the end of the day. So we are one university, and we have to focus on that. So when, our challenge now today is looking at when we have our business school and we have our education school across the quad from each other, and one's clamoring for more space and the other has open space, how do we know that, and how do we better utilize that space and work together instead of always having to build new? The other thing we want to look at is, do we have the right type of space? And when you're full, one of your challenges, you have no space to modernize. If you don't have swing space, you can't take a lab out of service, you can't take student housing down to modernize it. So how do you add that incremental space that allows you to do it? So right. P3 is one of the opportunities we're looking at. We've done it in student housing, where we've looked at, we had about 700 beds that we leased from a third party previously. 200 of those we bought back about a year ago when we had a right of first refusal on it, and the owner unfortunately passed away from COVID. So his family wanted to sell it. We were able to use our option, and we were able to purchase it because it is one of our more popular student housing options. But the other area for P3 that I think is something we didn't think about years ago with research, we do we're an AAU university, so we do a lot of research, a lot of government-funded research, but we have more and more demand from private companies who want to do research on our campus. They want to work with our faculty, want to work with our students. We have a couple Nobel laureate professors. They tend to drag in private industry who want to say, could you do research for us? So we need space that works for that. In fact, we're actually working with JLL on that. You didn't know that, because
no, I didn't.
So it's a different, you're a big organization. So we're working on the planning of that to come up with a new building that could be owned by a third party under a ground lease near our campus that we can bring in private industry to take to work in with our faculty and staff and students.
Yeah, it's a real interesting challenge. Pete, what for a shrinking university, what are the challenges there?
Well, for you Star Trekkers out there, space is the final frontier, right? If you're in higher education, space is the final frontier. And so space management is critical. We're in crisis mode. I mean, from 2011 through today, 1.3 million fewer butts and seats in all of our respective universities, 1.3 million less. The cliff's coming in 2025. Another 15% is being predicted. So as the whole world contracts in higher education, inevitability that we're dealing with, we do have some universities that are growing. So by quick show of hands, what universities in here, raise your hand. I know that some on the stage will raise their hand. Are you growing enrollment? A show of hands, which ones are shrinking, going down, and who's stagnant? So interesting mix here. So the point is, in higher education, we're seeing this shift to several universities that are still in growth mode, even though the totality of universities are having a reduction, and it's going to continue. And again, I don't know where you're going to be in 2025 to 2035, but if there's a 15% reduction, there will be emergence. Harvard University professor in 2018 wrote, 50% of the universities, 4,000 universities in the United States, will be bankrupt or merged. I didn't believe that, but since 2018 to present times, dozens of universities have gone bankrupt and merged. And it's not the Big Ten, it's not the SECs. There's 4,000 universities. Do the math. We're talking about maybe 500 to 600 universities will no longer be in existence in the United States. So space is significant. It's an issue. In Michigan, we're a poster child. 4% reduction this past year. Most of you between 1 and, by states, 1 and 3%. So Michigan has the worst reduction in student enrollment at 4%. In Michigan alone, 45,000 students from the peak to right now, and that's the size of 5 of the 15 publics, 45,000 students less in Michigan. And my good friends at Michigan State here, Adams here, University of Michigan, they're growing. They're over 50,000. They're at 40, they're growing to 50,000. So the majority in higher education is seeing that contraction, and I'm part of that. But Winston Churchill had the great quote, never miss a great crisis. So we're in crisis mode, okay? But we're managing it because we're ahead of the curve. We need more data on space management, and so it's about space management, about deferred maintenance. It's about the academy. How many of you in this room have the academy in tow with you in facilities on space management, or do they got their heads stuck in the sand that it's all about facilities issue, not about them? So we need the academy to be engaged with us. We need deferred maintenance data. We need space data. And lastly, where's the hockey puck going again? Which programs will be extinct? Which programs are parents saying, Johnny and Susie is not going to get a good job in this particular program? Should those programs be merged? Should those programs be eliminated? Which programs can grow? So we're on the growth mode of we're doing more in our facility, but also shrinking buildings, our footprint. 8 million, we'll be down to less than 7 million. What a great opportunity. You all get deferred maintenance and you're shrinking your campus? Duh, get rid of your worst buildings. We're limiting most of our deferred maintenance because we're contracting. So that's a great opportunity. And where are you at in that space? Do you have the data? Do you have the academy in tow with you to actually work together to figure out which programs need to be merged, which faculty need to be eliminated? It's a business, but yet it's education. So it's a complex situation, but for the majority, maybe not in this room, but the majority of the 4,000 universities in the United States, most of them are going to be contracting. Some of them will be gone. Many will be merged. Kind of a bummer, but it's a great opportunity. I love Churchill's statement. And we are like firemen. Firemen run into buildings on fire. Facility folks, we run to problems. We solve problems, right? And be ahead of that curve and solve the problems with data. And you need help with the business partners to get the data. And we're doing that right now.
Yeah, no doubt. I think it's going to take a lot of creative solutions. How many people in here are working on any kind of a P3, public-private? So we've got several people. Yeah, we've got a lot of customers that are doing that and trying to help them identify those opportunities, who they can work with, both to expand and contract their space. Contraction is hard, but...
You know, just to add on to what Peter talked about enrollment, I think one of the areas, even in a school that's growing enrollment, that we are seeing pressure on is the international student enrollment has dropped significantly across the country. And most of our international students pay full tuition. Most of our domestic students have a discounted rate of some sort. So I think that's adding additional financial challenges to all of us as we look at a contracting international population of people coming over to the United States. You know, the Ivies are still going to attract a lot of the international students, but I think other schools, we're going to struggle a little bit with that. And you know, as we look to backfill, we're taking from other schools as well domestically. So I think it is something we have to consider and we have to look at as well.
And I'm not sure about everyone else, but I know COVID accelerated our online course offerings significantly. So I'm sure that's also, even though enrollment might be growing, space usage might be declining from a classroom perspective. So we're hybrid still. We do have some courses that are available both online and in person, and then there's a few classes that are just online, and there's some master's level in computer science and business that are 100% online. So we're trying to increase our global footprint as well.
Terie brings up a good point because, we did put technology in these classrooms and there's an expectation that we continue to utilize it today. That used to be a badge of honor, right? That you show up sick to class. I'm not missing class no matter what. Today, they don't want you showing up, but they don't want you falling behind either. So how do we keep the students informed and not have them in the classroom when they're not feeling well?
Yeah, one of the things we see people implementing is like an experience app. So something that helps engage both the staff and the students about what's happening on campus, how to participate, notifications, everything from that to how do I reserve space. So how many people have some type of experience app, or they have some kind of engagement with their students via mobile app? Anybody? It's pretty new, but it's coming.
Well, I think we use Qualtrics for constant surveys for that purpose, but it's not really integrated with our actual systems. So,
Interesting. All right. One other thought on that. I've been talking to some people here at the event, and some people were saying they actually have legislation that keeps them from changing the environment at their university, both either raising a building or engaging in P3. It's really surprising. Somebody was telling me they had to get special permission from the governor just to get something done. All right, so our last topic is what support are you seeking or outsourcing to third-party providers versus solving internally? And we had a good bit of discussion about this. Peter, I know you had some thoughts about how that impacts everybody.
Yeah, outsourcing is not new. We've been around this barn several times, and some of you have outsourced, you've been back to insourcing. So there's no right or wrong answer to the whole thing, but at the end of the day, are you doing the right thing for the institution? You're doing the right thing for the students. And so with that, it's different for all of us. Some of us might do more housing. Some of us might want to outsource professional services. Some of us might want to outsource custodial. But there's a balance between the performance of what you're receiving, and sometimes people say that if I'm going to outsource, I'm going to get good performance in the front end, and it's going to dwindle, and I'm going to have to go back to in-house. So I challenge all of you to consider, is it really the bottom line dollar from your SFO that's driving that decision? Or is it truly from the heart and facilities, you doing the right thing for your institution, the right thing for your students? And sometimes that's in conflict. Don't have the answers, but you're going to have to look in the mirror and find that answer. You're going to have to look at your SFO and your senior leadership and maybe your trustees to make those tough decisions of what is the right thing, not only today, but for the future. And so we've looked at outsourcing, and we have outsourced pieces of the puzzle because it's the right place, the right time, the right decision for those circumstances. And we were pressured to do some outsourcing because of the bottom line. But with that, as we talked about the other day is from this panel, that you have an opportunity to actually challenge your staff. You can challenge your staff in saying there is someone else that can do your job. I think you can do the job better than they can. How are you going to step up and actually do the job better than someone else outside this institution? We've seen that in our power plant happen, and they are incredibly doing a wonderful job right now than anyone who we would have hired to outsource our power plant. They stepped up to the challenge, we gave them the challenge, and that's how you can transform an organization. So use it as leverage, but it's really from the heart about doing the right thing for the institution. And those are tough decisions for all of you.
Yeah. Mike, I know that you had an interesting perspective on this also, and in regards to, staffing and can you find the professions internally versus externally?
Sure. So, insource or outsource is, as Peter said, something that's been around for a while. This isn't anything that's new. In fact, when I interviewed for the position I'm in, I had the opportunity to meet my direct reports before I took the job. And one of the first things I told them was one of the things I really enjoy about working in our profession is everything we do can be outsourced. And I got kind of a look at me like, what does that mean? Is that what? And I said, no, what it means is everything can be outsourced. So it's up to us on a daily basis to prove that we could either do it better or for less or preferably both. And then, that's the benchmark that we should be always measuring ourselves against and looking at, can we do this internally better at a higher quality and less expensive than an outsourced third-party provider? If we can't, we should get out of that business. If we can, we should continue to do it. We should potentially grow it. And that's something we need to look at. But even when we are in an in-sourced model, I think we always should be in somewhat of a hybrid model. I believe there's some form of outsourcing that makes sense, whether it's in our construction management. We have internal project managers, but I don't want to ever staff to 100% maximum project load, because that means when we're not at 100%, I've got people who are underutilized. So, finding your right spot to keep people utilization at the right level. Maybe it's 80 or 90% of your demand that you want to focus on so that you could keep people utilized and not have people sitting around. The other thing that outsourcing does is it brings in expertise. It brings in unique, you may have a project that needs a unique skill set. It doesn't make sense to necessarily bring that in if you're not going to have to maintain that. It's for a limited period of time, so go out and bring that talent in. But make sure when you outsource, they're part of your team. They're not considered a third party that has nothing to do with you. We put our outsourced providers in our offices with us. They sit side by side with our full-time staff, so they work together. It should be invisible to a lot of the end users who we provide services for, whether that's an internal resource or an external resource. So it's something to just look at, how do we do it better? How do we continue to try to improve? And I think the outsource opportunity drives that. It also has the ability, to force us to look at things. I think we were a little complacent maybe, that once you make a decision one way or the other, you just stick with it and you don't remeasure it. And COVID was an example that forced us to take a hard look at it. At the beginning of COVID, we had to do some layoffs, and we were trying to minimize our layoffs. So the first thing we wanted to do was look at, where are we contracting services? And one of the areas we contracted probably 80% of our landscaping services. And we challenged our grounds team to bring that in-house. They wanted to do it, and we did it to keep those employees employed. We moved people around, but afterwards we found out we could do it better for less by bringing that in-house. So now it's the opposite. We're outsourcing about 20%, insourcing about 80%. So it's just continually looking at it and evaluating it.
Any specific examples of where you've had success with that, or what you're looking at in regards to outsourcing?
Well, we talked about grounds just now, and construction is obviously another area that makes a lot of sense. But even in facilities management, we have some areas, and one of my directors is here, and I've challenged him to say, hey, we have a portion of our student housing that has a third-party manager. Can't you do this in-house? And he comes back and says, no, the price is good, they do good work, I can't beat it. Right. Okay, we'll check next year at budget time again. Same thing on our transportation. So parking and transportation reports up through me, and we, years ago, outsourced all of our drivers. We still own the buses, though. That was a key decision, was we didn't want to get rid of the fleet, because then you really have a tough time ever bringing it back in-house. So even when we outsource, we own a lot of the equipment they use, because otherwise it's a big difference to say, if I have to bring this back in and I need to outlay a lot of capital in addition to the operating, this way we focus just on the operating margin because we own the equipment. So I think that's an important part of it. When you decide to outsource, think about, are you outsourcing everything or a portion of it? So again, we own the entire fleet, so now I'm evaluating the labor on an annual basis, right, and whether or not it makes sense to keep that outsourced or bring it internal.
Sure, that's good. Terie, what's happening at Rice?
Well, we also outsource construction. For crafts and operations of the plant, there are specific skill sets that we generally go to, Siemens being one of them. And for my team, it's very small, and so implementing brand new technology is generally a little bit of a reach for us. Even if I hire 10 grad students, it's too much, So we have a really good partnership with JLL to implement our systems and then also sustain our systems. So they become part of my team. My team does space management, asset management, and data management, if you will, in terms of understanding, and implementing and enforcing standards. So for all the different types of work tasks and nomenclature and all that. So we also do analytics and reporting. So those relationships are, really sustain us. So there's, I'm sure across the universities, additional examples, but in our, we are doing a certain amount of outsourcing to Siemens for monitoring the plants and all the fault tolerances and sensors and so on. But for the most part, we're all in-house. We have in-house custodians, in-house grounds people, landscaping, all of that.
So let me just take off on that, because we have a lot of internal discussions and have teams of people that do nothing but focus on data and helping clients, capture that data. Peter, what, in regards to data, what was your focus?
Yeah, and if you believe space is the final frontier in facilities, which I believe it is, how many of you have the expertise of the latest, best tricks and ticks in technology, gadgets to collect good, honest data on space management? Most of you probably don't. We're using old methods, old technology. So my point is that going to outside professionals that have the expertise, have the latest, best techniques to get the data from the academy. Of course, the first liar doesn't stand a chance as it relates to how many labs and how many offices does Dr. Schlepowitz have, okay? We know he has 3 offices, but he says he's only using 1, maybe. So we need to have that expertise. We have to have external parties that have the latest, best technology, the latest, best approaches, and we can learn from that. Maybe we might insource that over time, but it's terribly important to get that help, especially in space management or anything that's very technical. So we did a lot, for example, in continuous space monitoring. And continuous space monitoring was new to us. We were doing regular new building commissioning, retro commissioning, but continuous space monitoring is this new thing out there. It's about 5, 6 years old, but we didn't come up with it, the industry did. So we hired folks, we hired professionals to come in, and we're taking over that right now. So there's opportunities for technology, opportunities for the spaces in this new frontier, wherever higher it's going. You tell me where it's going 10, 20 years from now. But in this new frontier, what is out there? Where's the hockey puck going? Get that expertise from the business partners, learn from it, or continue using them.
I think Peter brings up an interesting point about the data, and I think that's one of the things that we sometimes don't think about, and where there's a big advantage to working with third parties, even if it's not on an outsourcing basis, but on a consulting basis. Our data is typically about our university, which is good data because it's applicable to us, but it's not a benchmark. It's not something we can compare to. So we own our own health system as well. So the university, we haven't broken off our health system. So we have 8 hospitals and 300 offsite properties that we manage, and we brought somebody in to take a hard look at our offsite properties. And the group we brought in happened to be JLL. We're not plugging them, but it was their healthcare group, and it was to take a look at, they work with 600 other hospitals. They have a database that we can't compare to. So when they look at our cost per square foot to maintain those properties, it's really something that I could go back and take a hard look at. And that's not something I could generate on my own. I could compare my 200 sites against each other, but I can't look at 600 different health systems across the country. And that was really valuable data to help us drive and make better decisions.
One thing to add, John, it's granted we're proud individuals as facility folks. We want to figure it out ourselves. But if you're smart enough, you got to go to somebody else. Yes, you have business partners, and actually you have peers. That's what this conference is about, right? So I would challenge everyone here, if there's something that you heard, you're going to hear on electric vehicles, Michigan State. You're going to hear Lander talking about something related to our profession. So connect with people, connect with peers during this conference, after the conference, and also you have professional associations. We're blessed to have Lander Medlin here, the Lander Medlin here from APA. And so what are you doing about leveraging your professional association in addition to business partners, in addition to peer groups? And so you're all proud, I know that, but be humble and ask for help and seek help.
Yeah, Yep. And Pete, I was looking back at my notes from one of our meetings. You made a statement that really resonated with me. It said you have to have the data to change the culture. And if you have that information, then you can really, it's not a matter of opinion. It's clear cut for everybody.
Yeah, it's easy for me to tell my boss, this is where I think the hockey puck's going, let's make it happen. Very difficult to make it happen on a campus without the academy in tow, the trustees in tow, all the leadership. And so it's about how do you tell that story, and we don't tell stories well enough. We have great stories to tell, but how are you telling it? And so I believe all of you need to figure out how to tell the story to your students through social media. How do you tell the story to your boss and the trustees? And those stories are going to be factual. In this day and age of lies and everything on the internet, at the end of the day, true facts win the day. What facts do you have? Okay, the internet of everything. We've got more stinking facts and more data in our buildings, in our resources, in facilities. You need to figure out how to harness that and tell those stories. You need to figure out how to get the data to sell the change. And at the end of the day, that's how you make change. And if you don't change it, trust me, your boss will change you.
Yep. Yep. And Mike, you made a great point that I was going to make. I'm glad you made it. And that is find a trusted partner that has that data, that comparison data, so you can see how do you measure up against your peers or others, other locations or buildings or whatever it might be that they're important to you. All right, so we have a few minutes left. I think we're going to maybe open it up to a couple of questions. If somebody would like to ask somebody on the panel here something, and we have a microphone coming around, just raise your hand.
I have the microphone.
Don't be shy.
Hands raised. Got one right. Jamie, hello.
Thank you. So 2 questions, right? Because nobody else raised their hand, so I'll ask them twofold. One, and I put them in here, is about, you talked about hoteling spaces and the need to use those. And you also talked about culture and how do we get new people who haven't experienced life on a campus environment to buy into that this is not just another job, right, that you can just change out. And so how do you think hoteling spaces will impact building culture, right? Building a sense of belonging and a tie back to the university. So that's question 1. Somebody choose who wants to answer that one. The other one, Mike, is directed towards you when you talked about outsourcing. So right now we're having to outsource functions that we have always held in-house. The hard part is it's a labor issue. But now the vendors we're using are paying a higher rate. So now we've got vendors coming in to help partner with labor that we can't afford to pay the same rate they are now paying. And so that's causing culture issues as well. So there's my 2 questions.
Yeah, that's a good one. So, Mike, I know you talked about, I think it was you that mentioned that you have new space that was more popular than old space in the reconfiguration.
Yeah, so I guess on the hoteling one, the culture is going to be a challenge. We don't know yet. We're learning, bringing them on campus. One of the things we've talked about with our IT department in particular is, do we have maybe you're going to be remote, but the first 90 days you're on campus. We have some type of intensive on-site immersive experience to get them started, kind of as an onboarding, and then they move to a more remote or hybrid type model. But honestly, we're just experimenting at this point. I don't think anybody has any good data of what it's going to take to get that, but I think it's over time. It's having events, it's having things on campus, bringing them in, whether it's athletics, other extracurriculars, get them on campus to really feel what it's like to be on campus, because I think there's nothing more important. I try to, as much as I can, if I happen to have a gap in my schedule, I get out and I walk around campus or I drive around campus and I try to get the feel and see things firsthand, because it's just a different feeling than trying to call in and do it all on Zoom. Zoom's a great tool and it's helped us with a lot, but it doesn't replace being there in person. So I think we're going to have to continue to experiment with that.
A lot of conflicting interests there that I believe the future will have a lot of remote activity. The next generation wants to be remote. And if we're going to employ people, we're going to have some level of that. And so we were at 3 days remote, 2 days, and now 1 day. Why? Because our president said, I don't see a vibrant campus. So, okay, let's go half-time remote, and let's see a vibrant campus. We have students on campus. Where the hell is everybody else? Okay, well, they're remote. So do you have that vibrancy? Do you want that vibrancy in your campus? And I think we want that because we are a placemaking institution, right? We are bricks and mortar, by and large, okay? People come to our institutions to actually enjoy the experience. The experience is a vibrant campus. So that's the other conflicting piece here is your campus vibrant, or are you trying to please the next generation to work from home? No easy answer there. And and again, the jury's still out where this is going, but we do need to try things. We are an institution of higher learning. We need to experiment. Education, higher education is still an ongoing experiment in our society. So the experiment will continue with hybrid mode education. It will continue to hybrid working. So see me 30 or 50 years from now, tell me how the experiment turned out, okay?
And to your question around outsourcing and competing with vendors for that scarce labor that's out there, which is a great point. I'm glad you brought it up because it's something we should have addressed. I mean, that is driving a lot of this. We can't hire enough people today, and we are competing. The reality is I don't think this is anything new. You know, we're a union shop, but we're operating engineers internally. So an example is when I hire an electrician, our operating engineers is a lower wage scale than if they were IBEW. So if they wanted to do that, they're going to make more money. It's a question of what do we offer as a total package, and that's something we have to continue to sell and to bring in. You know, I think we have better benefits. We have a consistent workplace. You come into the same place every day. You don't have to be worried about being laid off in a slow season. We did layoffs in COVID. It was the first time in 21 years we had to do a layoff. So, you know, it's a pretty consistent job. So I think we have to look at the other reasons you come to work for us, not just pay, because we're not going to be competitive on a pay basis, on a routine basis. That's the reality of higher education. We have a lot of benefits. We have that energy. We have that campus. We work for a non-for-profit organization, most of us. We have a mission that people feel invested in. That's what we have to sell. And we have to do a better job, frankly, of recruiting younger people into the field. We have a graying workforce. Peter's leaving us right now. You know, he's an example of that. But we have to look at how do we get, you know, and it's hard for us, right? Because we're institutions of higher learning. We think college is a good thing, but we have to realize college isn't for everyone. And how do we get people out of high school or potentially into trade schools or community colleges to come to work for us? And maybe they'll decide, you know, and we've tried to sell that maybe you want to go to school, but you're not ready yet. But you know what? You come to work for us, work a couple years, take a class. It's free. You could take a class, take 2 classes. And then if you decide to go for a degree, great. Do that down the road.
That's great.
But it's an opportunity for us to sell something different. But I think if we're going to solve this problem, we really have to start, and it's not even at the high school level, it's at the junior high level, and exposing groups to the trades. We have a full-time person in our department who's out doing just that. They're working with the local schools and others to try to convince people that the trades are a great way to go in the future.
Terie, you have any thoughts on this? How are you managing the workforce to maintain the university?
Well, we have a problem in terms of, especially in facilities, a lot of our people are older, and so we're trying to do some outreach programs like that, like you mentioned. So you forgot winter break, so that's a real big perk for us. At least we have a week off. But you know, it's a very challenging topic. In some of our more technical skills, they do work with the junior colleges. So because sometimes that first certification, then we can hire them in. So, but in general, like even the custodian staff we mentioned, a big thing is we haven't had to lay off people in the 2008 recession or during COVID. So it was quite a stretch, but we made it. So, you know, we have a lot of career people. So that's a good side of that problem.
Yeah.
I think.
All right, we're at time, so I want to thank you all for participating in this. It's really been great working with you and learning more, and we're going to continue the conversation online going forward.